May I call on the Honorable Attorney General to say prayers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let us pray. Almighty God, from whom all wisdom and power are derived, we beseech thee so to direct and prosper the deliberations of the Legislative Assembly now assembled, that all things may be ordered upon the best and surest foundation for the glory of thy name and for the safety, honor, and welfare of the people of these islands. Bless our sovereign lady, Queen Elizabeth II, Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, Charles, Prince of Wales, and all the royal family. Give grace to all who exercise authority in our Commonwealth, that peace and happiness, truth and justice, religion and piety may be established among us. Especially we pray for the governor of our islands, the premier, the Speaker of the Legislative Assembly, the Leader of the Opposition, Ministers of the Cabinet, ex officio members and members of the Legislative Assembly, that we may be enabled faithfully to perform the responsible duties of our high office. All this we ask for thy great name's sake. Let us say the Lord's Prayer together. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. The Lord bless us and keep us. The Lord make his face shine upon us and be gracious unto us. The Lord lift up the light of his countenance upon us and give us peace, now and always. Amen.
Please be seated. Proceedings are resumed.
Reading by the Honourable Speaker of Messages and Announcements.
We have apologies from the member from Savannah who is not able to be here. Honorable members, Erskine May speaks to many things that we do not do in this legislature because we don't have the ability, by way of funds, for instance, or just the way our small assembly works under our rules. Inasmuch as I have been criticized on a radio show this morning, I take this procedure here to say that my ruling in not allowing the term of what is called shadow cabinet in the House to be used is that shadow cabinets are made from a party machinery. That is what Erskine May speaks to. The opposition in this House has said to the public of this country in the general elections in May that they are independents. They were elected as independents. They are recorded in our records as independents. Our record speaks. Independent members, Honorable Diaz Miller, Leader of the Opposition, Mr. Albert H. Saku, MLA, Deputy Leader of the Opposition, Mr. Anthony S. Eden, elected member for Savannah, Mr. Christopher S. Saunders, elected member for Bordentown West. Mr. Kenneth V. Bryan, elected member for Georgetown Central. Mr. V. Arden McLean, elected member for East End. All independents. The fact that somehow the member from North Side is the leader of the opposition is their business. Our Constitution, I think, say they can choose a leader. My business is to see to it that proper process and procedure is carried out in this honorable House. And our rules and the precedents and conventions we have followed over the years and which have worked for us are not changed just to suit someone. Our Constitution do not say they can form a shadow cabinet. And in all of my discussions on the Constitution told me to have a shadow cabinet, there has to be a party machinery. Because they are independents and have chosen to band together do not mean I have to change the standing of this honorable House. Then the leader of the opposition comes from the largest majority party. They can choose themselves as what is called a shadow cabinet. That is their business, but they are not a party. Erskine May speaks to all this as the largest minority party that have certain rules and rights. How do they turn all the independents who say they are not a party into a party machinery with the machinations they want? Our Constitution is specific. I wonder, I must say, if I had taken the offer and been their speaker, what would be the process? Because I would not have changed. I know the rules. I know the processes of this House. The procedure of a member wishing to speak is to catch my eye. Yesterday, I called the customary 3 times for members to speak. After the 3rd time, I was calling on the mover for his right of reply. I saw the member for Georgetown Central scrambling to stand up. Another member I thought rose as well. I considered that there are new members here and changed the customary 3 times call and allowed the House to continue the debate and called on the member for Georgetown Central as my eye caught him first. Had he said to me, "I'm not ready," and sat down, I would have gone to the next member, the member who is now debating. For him to get on the radio to say I somehow forced him to speak and he wasn't ready is an insult to the presiding officer. Both members are in contempt. I will decide on the next course of action, if any. But the leader of the opposition ought to know what contempt is and that there are rules which you do not go out and do. And just because you can do it on the radio, members ought to know that. If the Public Account Committee members feel so strong about government employment, then they have avenues as members of this honorable House. But if it was intended for the Public Accounts Committee to go after every department of government or government statutory bodies who employ people, then perhaps all of us would be on it because all of us would want to say something about government employment. But that is not the purpose of the committee. That is not the role of the committee. And there are rules. I'm not new here I have given over 32 years of service. I know the games, and the member for the District of Northside is playing it well. Probably right down to a motion that they would bring. But they all catch the Speaker's eye. My rulings yesterday are all in accordance with our standing orders, our immunities, powers, and privileges law, the precedents and centuries-old conventions which we use and which are still relevant and must be used when members choose to, for their own opposition purpose, go outside rules they must abide by, whether they like the presiding officer or whether they like the government or not. This House is bound by those rules. If they are smart enough to get away with it, if they know parliamentary procedure that much and can slip by, well, perhaps then they will. But I'm not new. I'm well seasoned. And I will ask this House, who's the final arbiter of the rules I carry out. I ask members to abide by those rules. I am the presiding officer. Whether you like me or whether I choose not to be a part of any particular side in the past, I am the presiding officer. When you speak, you don't speak to members, and we allow banter to and fro in the cut and thrust of debate and some levity. But when you deliberately get up and refuse to look at the Speaker, to address the Speaker, you are not addressing the chamber as such. You are addressing the presiding officer. You are not addressing the television or the radio or the gallery as such. You are not addressing a particular member, and if you care to, and you know the rules, and you somehow get away with it, well, that's the cut and thrust of debate that we accept. But when you deliberately do as I have seen because you don't like the presiding officer, and perhaps because the presiding officer chooses to be where he is at, not on their side, if I must say so. I am not a part of the independents. Honorable members, what went on radio this morning is a contempt of this honorable House. I will decide and look at the rules accordingly. The member for East End.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in your, and I'm trying to clarify something and get your ruling on this. In your statement, you said that the independent members over here are not a party.
Honorable member, I'm not allowing further excursions into those matters that I have spoken to. Clark?
Presentation of petitions.
No, there are no petitions.
Statements by honorable members and ministers of the cabinet.
There are none.
Personal explanations.
There are none.
Obituary and other ceremonial speeches.
None.
Raising of matter of privileges.
None.
Government business. Bills. The appropriation financial years 2018-2019 bill 2017. Continuation of debate on the budget address and the throne speech together with the government's policy statement.
The appropriation financial years 2018 and 2019 bill 2017 continuing of debate on the budget address and throne speech, together with the government's policy statement, the member for Georgetown South. Continuing. The member has 1 hour and 20 minutes to her benefit.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I continue with my contribution to the 2018-2019 budget. Mr. Speaker, the Premier has previously stated that this government is committed to a target of at least 75% of high school graduates moving on to post-secondary education or training by the end of this administration. The ministry, with the support of Cabinet, has put in place a national training council comprised of relevant industry bodies and stakeholders to focus on the development of a national technical and vocational education and training, or TVET system. Two of the areas that the National Training Council is currently focusing on are the completion of a TVET policy review that includes research related to the progression pathways from high school through further education, and a review of the career counseling provision in relation to TVET. An analysis of the data shows that approximately 50% of our high school graduates remain in post-compulsory education or training 1 year after completing compulsory education. So we have 3.5 years to make up the remaining 25%. But, Mr. Speaker, I have to say that I am not entirely satisfied with students receiving only 1 year of additional post-secondary training. We need to ensure that the additional year, or indeed all years spent in post-secondary education, adequately provide necessary training and experience so as to allow our young people to be fully prepared and qualified to take up jobs in our islands, some of which are held by guest workers on work permits who are qualified and experienced. Mr. Speaker, we cannot afford, as a country, to allow our young people to be satisfied with the minimum. So we need to encourage them to take up full certificate or degree programs, locally or overseas, that will allow them to take their place in the job market, here or elsewhere, and thus enable them to provide for themselves and their families. Mr. Speaker, the University College of the Cayman Islands, or UCCI, as our national tertiary institution, contributes to realizing the national vision for tertiary education in the Cayman Islands. While it delivers a number of academic programs, UCCI also seeks to become influential in the development of TVET through the UCCI TVET Committee and through a restructure and relaunch of its TVET programs. This should further ensure that our students are presented with career choices that are based on their aptitude and interests, and that will ultimately lead to a gainful, decent employment. Mr. Speaker, we will be working diligently to achieve the target of 75% set by this government, and in order to do so, we will be working closely with all stakeholders, including career guidance counselors, to ensure that our students are presented with clear and appropriate employment pathways from high school to tertiary education and training. Mr. Speaker, turning now to health care, I am pleased to see that the Premier has spoken of the much-needed mental health facility. Families whose loved ones will require the services offered at this facility are relieved that this care will be received at home here in Cayman where family members are able to visit them and support them. It is intended that this facility will be built on government-owned lands in East End, which is in close proximity to existing farms in the area. It is my hope, Mr. Speaker, that the patients, where appropriate, will be taught farming and other skills. This will not only be therapeutic for them, helping with their recovery, but also providing them useful skills upon their release. I see, Mr. Speaker, that the Premier has addressed the complexities of the healthcare system. In doing so, I am sure that he will appreciate any kind of input other members of this honorable House can provide. I have thought long and hard about this area over the years, Mr. Speaker. I have listened to the concerns expressed by not just members of the public, but also those of our legislators. The spiraling cost of health care preoccupies many minds. When I entered the private sector some 35 odd years ago, the lifetime maximum an insurance company would spend on any one individual client was $1 million. As far as I am aware, this figure is still the same today, and even though the cost of health care coverage has increased significantly. Perhaps it may be time, Mr. Speaker, for the government to enter into discussions with the insurance industry with a view to increasing their contribution to the indigent fund, increasing the maximum lifetime coverage, as well as reducing the number of illnesses deemed to be pre-existing conditions which they do not cover. What I consider unfair, Mr. Speaker, is that many persons who have health insurance become indigent if they develop a major illness despite having paid high premiums for many years. Another area that needs attention, in my view, Mr. Speaker, is the role of the private sector when their staff members develop major illnesses. Many of them, Mr. Speaker, pass over their staff members to government once they have exhausted their insurance benefits. I very much doubt that the number of persons in this situation in any private sector company is large. It must also be taken into account, Mr. Speaker, that quite a number of our private sector companies are quite prosperous. It would be gratifying, Mr. Speaker, if they allowed their moral conscience to guide them when dealing with this particular issue. Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to see that this government is as concerned as our residents are over the increase in crime in our community and is committed to recruiting additional police officers whose focus will be on deterring and detecting crime, as well as making their presence felt in the communities. I believe, Mr. Speaker, that a more holistic approach needs to be taken in regards to deterring crime. A closer look must be taken at social intervention. I note that it is government's intention to review those departments which deal with various forms of social work. In doing so, I hope that we are going to look closely at the work of the National Drug Council, child prevention programs, drug intervention programs, community development intervention, and parenting programs. These programs, Mr. Speaker, must be robust and effective if they are to make a difference. The relevant departments may also need institutional strengthening if they are expected to carry out their duties effectively. They must also work in close collaboration with each other, and they will all have to work closely with education, where most issues affecting children present themselves first. Mr. Speaker, I am grateful for the opportunity to address this House. I wish to thank my constituents of Georgetown South and others for sharing their concerns with me. I am committed to doing my best to formulate solutions to the many issues articulated, and I will certainly call upon them to assist in this honorable House. I also wish to thank the Honorable Premier, my Minister, the Honorable Juliana O'Connor-Connolly, Cabinet Ministers, Councillors, and my Chief Officer and his team for their support. Last but certainly not least, I wish to thank the Honorable Finance Minister and his team within the Ministry of Finance for their excellent work and commitment in producing this 2-year budget. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, it has just recently come to my attention that we only have 9 members present, 1 from the opposition, and as such, we do not have a quorum.
Thank you, Honorable Member from Prospect. I knew that government ministers were in a meeting, and I would hope that other members will come back in as soon as they can to form the quorum. 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I think we are quorate now. I will call on any other member that wishes to speak. The Honourable Minister. Honourable Minister of Commerce, Planning and Infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to make what is my very first contribution as a minister in this government of national unity. It is certainly with my great privilege and honor to address you and my fellow members here today as I present my thoughts, views, and ideas about the present, future, and the policies, programs, and projects of my ministry and the entities within the Ministry of Commerce, Planning, and Infrastructure. Of course, Mr. Speaker, none of this would be possible without the confidence and support of the people of Georgetown, and in particular Georgetown North. And so I will take just a few brief moments to talk about some of the challenges that we are facing as a constituency in Georgetown North, and I'm sure some of my other colleagues will identify with these. Mr. Speaker, one of the issues plaguing our constituency and is growing at an alarming rate is the issue of abandoned cars and illegal or unlawful garages that are popping up on the roadsides, within residential areas, and in some instances, public lands. Not only are these an eyesore, Mr. Speaker, but they also create an environmental hazard. And, of course, Mr. Speaker, it has become known that this is where, quite often, persons will hide drugs and guns and other illegal paraphernalia. Mr. Speaker, we are in desperate need of an update to our public health laws to give the necessary enforcement authority to the Department of Environmental Health to assist and to deal with this growing problem within our communities. Mr. Speaker, the other issue that we're facing in our communities is the issue of loud music, and whether they're parties or sometimes called fish fries or referred to as just gatherings. The unfortunate truth is that quite often these loud music sessions go on throughout the night, and it has really created a major issue for many of our residents, especially our senior residents who are having difficulties in sleeping at night due to the loud music. Quite often, Mr. Speaker, this is accompanied by the presence of gambling and other illegal activities, and you would have seen in the press quite recently, one of the newest trends is that of the rooster fights, that they're even importing those now from overseas. I must take pause here, Mr. Speaker, to thank the Commissioner of Police who spent a few hours with me on a Saturday touring my constituency and seeing some of the challenges that we have. As you know, my constituency of Georgetown North have quite a few areas of high density residential, and many of the residents there face these issues on a daily basis. And so I do want to thank the Commissioner for taking time out to see this for himself. And I also want to thank the Commissioner for his efforts and his commitment to the community policing, and I look forward to meeting our community officer for the District of Georgetown North, or for the constituency of Georgetown North. Mr. Speaker, there is also the issue of theft and robbery. Quite recently we had a very brazen armed robbery at the Wharf restaurant, which was highly publicized. We are making efforts, Mr. Speaker, within the constituency to clear out the lands that sometimes harbor and assist criminals in avoiding being captured or allowing them to have time to lay low, as to say. So we've identified a number of these areas in and around the Georgetown area and Georgetown North area that we're working along with the NRA and the community groups to clean up these areas and keep the brushes low, and to allow or to remove what is almost perfect hiding place for persons who are planning or escaping from committing these serious offenses and evading the police. I'm also very pleased as a representative of Georgetown North that this budget displays this government's commitment to fighting crime in the financing of some 70-odd more police officers over the next 2 years, and the equipment to enable them to carry out their duties. Mr. Speaker, another issue that my constituency face, which is not unique to my constituency, and we all experienced it most recently, is the issue of flooding. But I can say that, Mr. Speaker, much work has been done in the last 4 years in addressing this, and in particular in my constituency, we've seen quite a bit of success. We are now also, we've seen some in some of the other constituencies where we have been able to manage the water quite quickly. I have been touring, Mr. Speaker, some of the areas that outside of my constituency that are severely affected by the flooding, and we've identified some areas where we will make efforts to try and alleviate it the next time we have these sorts of rains. But there is much, much more work to be done, and as development continues, I can see that this issue will not go away, but in fact, perhaps grow in nature. Mr. Speaker, also, I just want to highlight that we do have plans to upgrade the West Bay Road, plans to implement additional traffic calming measures, also to enhance the West Bay Road, the southern end of West Bay Road, which is a main tourism area on the island. And we also are looking forward to the implementation of a pilot program with LED lights, which should help brighten the area and make it safer for pedestrians. Of course, Mr. Speaker, and I'll touch on it a bit more, but the Georgetown revitalization is also an important part of, or will be very important to the constituents of Georgetown North, and in particular, the ability to redevelop our more urban areas within the capital. And so, as I said, I will speak to that a bit later on in my presentation. Moving on, Mr. Speaker, I'm equally delighted that some of my cherished priorities are amongst those that government will work on to accomplish in these 2 budget years. These priorities include improving the quality of people's lives, building innovative infrastructure, and new and improved motorways for a stress-free commute, promoting urban development, mainly through the Georgetown Revitalization Project, affordable energy through implementing the National Energy Policy, and the setting up of a Small Business Development Center, commonly referred to as a SBDC. It was indeed a proud moment, Mr. Speaker, for me as a minister to have been a part of the throne speech, government policy and budget presentations last Friday, in which the stellar performance of the government was outlined. It was made crystal clear how robust, vibrant, and dynamic our economy is, and how we are poised for strong economic and social growth built on the foundation provided by the previous administration, of which I was a proud member of. I am thrilled, Mr. Speaker, for what the future holds for these beloved islands we call home, and our people, but especially our younger generations. I join all in this noble house, Mr. Speaker, and indeed all in the Cayman Islands, when we give fervent and heartfelt thanks to God for sparing us during this very active hurricane season. I share with a saddened heart in our collective sympathy for the ravages visited upon so many of our brothers and sisters within the region. We in the Cayman Islands, ably led by our leader, the Honorable Premier, have shared some of their pain and tried to show our solidarity, support, and empathy in concrete terms for some of those nations so badly hurt in the twin devastations visited by Hurricanes Irma and Maria. Mr. Speaker, permit me to continue my contribution with a hearty vote of gratitude to Her Excellency the Governor for her final throne speech to this House. I fully endorse the Honorable Premier when he thanked her in his budget policy statement. Mr. Speaker, Governor Kilpatrick, who has graced these premises periodically over her extended tenure as Cayman Islands Governor, has always displayed great enthusiasm and devotion to the people of these islands. Her interactions with our people have always been warm and cordial, and she has always been very welcoming. In her address, the Governor reiterated that our government of national unity will continue the major projects begun by the last administration. Mr. Speaker, in one way, I cannot believe that it was just over 4 years ago that I first entered these halls as a public servant, and that this is my second term in office. Time certainly has flown. Coming into public life with a strong private sector and corporate background, in the past 4 years, I have come to appreciate the challenges that the public service faces in the provisions of vital services to its clients, its customers, who, Mr. Speaker, are the people of these Cayman Islands. My respect has grown for the civil servants who are hardworking and who strive daily for the excellence that the head of the civil service, the Honorable Deputy Governor, constantly demands of them. Mr. Speaker, I am very happy to be associated and working with the civil service at this time in their evolution and their path to greater efficiency. However, Mr. Speaker, there is much to be done, and it is my intention to ensure that the requisite processes and the procedures are put in place to ensure that going forward, quicker and more efficient service is received by the business community and, most important, by the public at large. Mr. Speaker, I welcome the move to the 2-year budget cycle, as the Honorable Finance Minister stated in his budget address. I too firmly believe, as the Finance Minister mentioned, that this change will significantly improve the efficiency and productivity of both the legislative and the executive branches of our public service, and look forward, along with the wider public, to getting more robust information on the actual performance of our public sector agencies. Mr. Speaker, I fervently laud the financial discipline and custodial care that our previous administration ushered into the Cayman's public life under the venerated past Finance Minister, the Honorable Marco Archer. This firm foundation is being taken forward and built upon by our present Finance Minister, the Honorable Roy McTaggart. As members of this government of national unity, I am delighted that the government's fiscal strategy to manage finances are governed by 3 guiding principles: generating substantial operating surpluses each year, 2, levying no new taxes or fees on the public, and 3, no new borrowing apart from refinancing a portion of a 2019 bond that the government is committed to from the past. I think it is of vital importance that I reiterate that the Honorable Finance Minister stated in his budget address that the last time that Cayman Islands government introduced significant revenue measures was in the 2012-13 financial year. Mr. Speaker, it is truly phenomenal that for the last 4 budget cycles, we have not sought to implement increased revenue measures. In fact, we have done the impossible and actually reduced the fees charged by government, whilst at the same time ensuring that so many vital projects and initiatives have taken forward. Mr. Speaker, this is no small feat, and I am enormously proud to be a part of this remarkable government. Mr. Speaker, we all know that the best result comes from teamwork, and in that regard, I have the distinct honor of working with a team of dedicated civil servants who comprise the staff of the Ministry of Commerce, Planning, and Infrastructure. Mr. Speaker, I sought to visit every department under my ministry to get a better understanding of what they did on a day-to-day basis and what challenges they encountered in carrying out those duties. Mr. Speaker, it was an eye-opening experience as to the vast complexity and diversity of the services they deliver on a daily basis. Mr. Speaker, those visits have equipped me and my ministry with a deeper understanding so that we were able to submit a meaningful, effective, and well-balanced budget submission, of which, Mr. Speaker, I will now highlight for the members. However, before I do that, Mr. Speaker, permit me to outline some of my deepest convictions and what I truly expect of every one of us who serve the public through this ministry, beginning with myself. As members are aware and may have often heard, it is only when we are willing to lead by example and through enlightened and convincing action that we can expect reciprocity with dedication and eager participation from the people who put into action our policies. That, Mr. Speaker, is to say the civil servants. Coming from the background of being a small business entrepreneur, I have personally expressed disappointment and dismay in the past when government red tape reared its ugly head and dampened, if not stymied, the plans and aspirations of our entrepreneurs. We need to make it easier to do business without being stifled by red tape. Mr. Speaker, we cannot expect to improve the quality of our people's lives when we do not correspondingly improve how they can undertake their business more easily and therefore more efficiently. However, we are also require and expect the private sector to do their part in the spirit of partnership and to embrace change and new practices. I'm extremely happy to state that our government of national unity has put in place exciting and far-reaching strategic, broad outcomes that we are committed to and are taken forward in this overall term in conjunction with time deadlines for completion within the coming 2 years of this budget cycle. This ethos gels happily with one of my prime priorities, Mr. Speaker, which is to reduce red tape for our overall business community, but especially for the entrepreneurs overseeing micro, small, and medium-sized businesses. Since I am one of these people, I can directly relate to the issues and demands facing these segments, and I am best placed to ensure that the appropriate changes occur. These small businesses are the backbone of the Cayman Islands economy and provide the majority of employment opportunities for Caymanians. Let us never forget that it is with their growth that our overall national economic progress is linked. A thriving entrepreneurial community moves the government away from having to take a predominantly welfare-style approach, builds individual and national wealth, and additionally provides Caymanians with a real sense of worth. In this regard, I would reiterate previously stated views that it is essential that Caymanians, all Caymanians, fully benefit from the economic success story that is the modern Cayman Islands. I remain committed to ensuring that this trickle-down effect of wealth occurs within these islands. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to report that our commitment to the micro, small, and medium business segments has resulted in a growing and thriving economy with renewed investor confidence and continuing expansions of small and large businesses. The immediate benefits has been more economic opportunities and more jobs for Caymanians. Mr. Speaker, over the past 4 years, the previously progressive-led government helped Caymanians start more than 1,000 new businesses. The strategic broad outcomes put in place by the Government of National Unity includes the following priorities within my ministry and those actions which we are committed to. Whilst not intended to be an exhaustive list, Mr. Speaker, please permit me to list some of these proposed actions and initiatives. 1, continue with and accelerate the implementation of the Georgetown Revitalization Project. Develop and implement sector-based plans that support the diversification of the Caymanian economy. Develop and implement area-based plans that support economic growth across the Grand Cayman and the sister islands. 4, improve and advance the support available to entrepreneurs wanting to start and grow small businesses. 5, remove unnecessary regulation and bureaucracy from the small business sector. And 6, complete a new national development plan. Mr. Speaker, my ministry and departments have commenced and will continue to develop significant initiatives in all the above referenced areas in order to meet the strategic goals set out by the government. Mr. Speaker, let me start with one of the outcomes that is very close to my heart, the micro, small, and medium business sector. I'm happy to state that one prime initiative will be the setting up of a Small Business Development Center, better known as the SBDC. As members will note, we have allocated funds in this 2-year budget to set up such a center, intended to operate as a one-stop shop to promote and cater to the interest of micro, small, and medium business sectors. We are currently working closely with the Cayman Islands Small Business Association and the Cayman Islands Chamber of Commerce to ensure that the center will be tailor-made to meet the needs of our entrepreneurs. The center will benefit from and utilize local and international best practice standards. Mr. Speaker, members will recall that my ministry hosted a 2-day workshop in mid-September this year where a highly regarded expert in the field from the United States helped us understand and engage better in taking this idea forward. It is intended that the services provided by this center will include professional business counseling, technical training and assistance with gaining access to startup funding. For adequate funding to be available, we need both the public and private sector on board, and we will work with the local banking institutions to ensure that the appropriate support is forthcoming. As stated in the National Unity Government's policy paper, it is the intention that the government, via my ministry and the Department of Commerce and Investment, will reduce the level of regulations that hinder small businesses. Mr. Speaker, we also plan to introduce a tiered fee structure to ensure equitable payments across business entities based on their size. Mr. Speaker, in order to ensure that we have a finger constantly on the business pulse and are thus more receptive to their needs, my ministry will hold regular meetings with the Cayman Islands Small Business Association and the Chamber of Commerce. This will enable us to see how we can provide extra support, including relevant advice and training to new entrepreneurs. Whilst government will lead from the front on this vitally important initiative, I would continue to ask for the support of the Chamber and the Cayman Islands Small Business Association, along with the private sector, and of course the community at large. Mr. Speaker, I've spent some time explaining this new center, as I believe it is a long time coming, and we as a government are committed to making the smaller entrepreneurs in our community function in an easier climate and gain prosperity. In this regard, Mr. Speaker, the Department of Commerce and Investment has proposed proposals in train to significantly amend and make easier the application process for the trade and business licenses, as well as liquor licenses. The Ministry and DCI have recently completed a complete review of the trade and business application process, and the agreed amendments, some of which will require legislative changes, and which will reduce the administrative burden placed on the applicants by 47% for sole traders and a whopping 66% for companies. These are very significant and long overdue revisions and are but one early example of the pace of change that I wish to see. Mr. Speaker, it is intended that both the liquor license law and the trade and business license law will be amended in 2018-19 to bring full effect to the changes envisaged. This initiative will be supported by the developments in conjunction with my e-government and computer services department of a new online application system for use by the Department of Commerce and Investment and its applicants. This new system will be introduced within the first quarter of 2018, Mr. Speaker. The launch of the Cayman Business Portal will provide the ability for the Department of Commerce and Investment and the General Registry to exchange information in order to advance the effective delivery of their services to individuals and businesses. This interability to provide to cross over information will provide immediate benefits to our clients to support applications for businesses' licenses. Mr. Speaker, with more than 45% of our businesses registered as sole traders, the fee discounts program for a small business continues to be very successful. Over 4,000 small and micro businesses have already taken advantage of this program. The benefits far outweigh the circa 2 million that government has and will continue to commit to the initiative. Mr. Speaker, members are also aware that the Cayman Islands are gearing up for the 4th round of evaluations by the Financial Action Task Force in December of this year. This is a regulatory audit to ensure that compliance with international standards governing financial services, terrorist financing, and money laundering. Members are also aware that in March this year, Cabinet designated the Department of Commerce and Infrastructure as the Cayman Islands regulatory for local designation, non-financial business and professions. Mr. Speaker, whilst the assessment is wide-ranging across many areas of the Cayman economy, from a Department of Commerce and Investment perspective, data about the realtors and dealers in precious metals and stones will be presented to highlight compliance. As part of this strategy, the Department of Commerce and Investment early in October held a highly informative workshop for members of the real estate and jewelry profession. Mr. Speaker, this was to prepare them in turn to comply and meet the requirements of an ongoing national risk assessment survey, during which time the Department of Commerce and Investment will be contacting all local realtors and dealers in precious metals and stones. This will assist these persons in the private sector to participate in data provisions for the FATF assessment. Department of Commerce and Investment, therefore, Mr. Speaker, has a critical role to play in diminishing the risk of terrorist financing and money laundering to our jurisdiction, and in maintaining a supervisory framework for real estate agents and dealers in precious metals and stones, consistent with the FATF standards for anti-money laundering and counterfeiting financing of terrorism. Mr. Speaker, I have again elaborated this initiative in some detail, since it is such an important one in ensuring that the Cayman Islands remain proactively on top of an international regulatory assessment. Mr. Speaker, turning my attention now to the Department of Vehicle and Driver's Licenses, the DVDL. As members know, the department is well into implementation of the new vehicle registration system, and despite some initial teething troubles, it is now firmly on track. The new and revised plates are continuing to be supplied and are a vital component of the new system. This system, Mr. Speaker, will allow for better registration and monitoring of vehicles for revenue gathering purposes. It will also provide extremely valuable assistance to the law enforcement agencies. The additional phases of the new system are provided for in the new budget, and once the system is fully enforced, it will be one of great benefit to our community. Mr. Speaker, I'm also very happy to announce that in short order, the department will reintroduce and make available the always popular personalized license plates. The special edition license plates will include a new and unique features of the Cayman Islands, including the West Indian whistling duck, the stingray, and the coral reef designs. Mr. Speaker, the department continues to improve on road safety education through the driver's education program in the 2 government high schools. Mr. Speaker, as you are very much aware, the West Bay Licensing Office has outgrown its office space and is facing increasingly more customer service demands. The department is in the process of identifying a suitable new location. Similarly, at the main Crew Road location, the department will be improving customer service by hiring 2 new licensing officers by the end of this year, adding a further 2 licensing officers in 2018 and 2 more in 2019. Mr. Speaker, as the numbers of vehicles continue to increase at a phenomenal rate, we must ensure that the necessary resources are put in place to guarantee continued great customer service. While civil servants do a fine job providing the service expected of them by the general public, it is important to me that we in government ensure that the departments are given the appropriate tools for the civil servants to provide the first-class service expected of them. I note the Deputy Governor recently introduced a 5-year strategic plan towards creating a world-class civil service. I applaud that initiative and its ideals. However, we as a government and all members must do their bit in ensuring that the appropriate resources are in place to enable this goal to be achieved. In this regard, Mr. Speaker, the government and I are committed to funding a comprehensive redevelopment of the Department of Vehicle and Equipment Services, DVES, and its compound on North Sound Road. Funds have been placed in the budget for this project, which is anticipated to commence in the first quarter of 2018. Mr. Speaker, the redevelopment aims to create a safer working environment in which the staff and particularly mechanics can work under a proper covered facility, a far cry from all the working bays currently that are insufficiently covered and do not protect the staff from the elements. Mr. Speaker, I visited the offices at the DVES personally, and it is a crying shame the conditions in which those staff members have to work in. The new facility will also provide much needed additional work area as well as expanded administration space. With the new changes completed, we expect improved service delivery and to create, as I outlined, better working conditions for all current, including administrative and future staff, as well as incorporating important technology advances in the industry. Mr. Speaker, additionally, on the fuel supply and management side, the department is in the process of revising its current fuel supply contract for the next 5 years and will be replacing fuel storage and supply hardware, such as tanks and pumps, something that has been long overdue. Mr. Speaker, action in this area will also commence within the first quarter of 2018. Mr. Speaker, with an eye to continuing to modernize and standardize the government's vehicle fleet, and in keeping with government's commitment to the national energy policy, it has been agreed that 10% of the Cayman Islands government fleet will be electrified within 5 years. Work in this regard will continue over the next 2 years, and this will include the installation of the requisite vehicle charging stations. Mr. Speaker, that brings me to the Facilities Management Department, which will take on this important task along with the Department of Vehicle and Equipment Services, while continuing to effectively manage the government administration building. The department will also work to ensure continued full occupancy of the government administration building and to improve on the sustainability and maintenance procedures of the building, including maintaining its LEED, or Lead in Energy and Environmental Design, silver certification for the building. The department will also ensure proper maintenance and upgrade programs are undertaken in the Cayman Islands Environmental Center that houses the Department of Environmental Health and the district community centers and town halls. Facilities Management Department is committed and will continue to maintain the maintained schedule at the district centers to address the needs as it relates to air conditioning, electrical, and plumbing repairs. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to announce that the much-needed upgrades to the East End Community Center's kitchen, which we've heard pleas for over and over again, will commence in short order. This kitchen presently provides meals to over 50 elderly persons in the community 3 days a week. Moving next to the Department of Planning. Government has an excellent track record of attracting new businesses, and this is happening, Mr. Speaker, at an unprecedented rate. As the Honorable Premier mentioned in his statement, and I quote, "Promoting business growth and development is key to Cayman's prosperity," end of quote. He went on to state that the sharp increase in planning approvals from 760 projects valued at an estimated $342 million from January to October of 2016 to the now 1,013 projects valued at a value of $688 million for the same period in 2017 demonstrates increased investor confidence in the economic performance and the fiscal stability of the Cayman Islands. However, this new development brings with it a significant challenge to the infrastructure and especially to the demands made on the department. On the one hand, investors want a swift and easy bureaucratic approval process. And on the other hand, the planning department needs to be satisfied that new development meets the required standards. Mr. Speaker, government is not deaf to the demands of the private and public sectors in this regard, and steps are being taken to make sure a simpler, quicker, and more user-friendly application process is put in place. Government is aware of some of the concerns, and we are taking measures to deal with them during this budget period. Mr. Speaker, some of these actions that the Planning Department will seek to do include: 1, fully implementing the Builders' Law and regulations to strengthen and develop the building industry. 2, commence the process to update the building code and related codes to ensure that the built environment remains safe and resilient to both natural and human-made disasters. 3, protect the economic welfare of these islands by ensuring the built environment is safe and resilient. 4, drive efficiency gains and increase customer satisfactions through using the e-government solutions and platforms, notably through the online planning system, or the OPS, to increase the level of workflow management and the frequency and scope of communication with its clients. 5, streamline and strengthen the development of the regulatory process through the introduction of professional registration legislation for key service providers, notably architects and engineers. Mr. Speaker, the Department, in conjunction with the Central Planning Authority, will also commence and complete a long overdue review of the 1997 Development Plan and its associated legislation to ensure that the planning system remains fit for purpose. Mr. Speaker, clearly the review of the 20-year-old development plan is, as I mentioned, long overdue, and I have given it priority. The islands-wide review will be completed within the next 15 months. This review will include a full public consultation to ensure that we get a plan that works for all within the Cayman Islands. Mr. Speaker, members will know from the previous budget that the Department of Planning has been highly successful in the launching of its online planning system. The first phase of the online planning system, was launched during the previous administration. They have now launched a second phase in the online submissions, which covers both a project application relating to planning permissions and permit applications in relation to the construction process. Throughout each procedure, applicants and agents are now provided with automatic email updates of reviews and inspections. Mr. Speaker, for the general public, those watching and listening, and for the members of the House, what that means in real terms, as I visited and saw a demonstration between an inspection being done manually, or a review of plans being done manually, and one on the online system. And the difference is one person sitting with one computer, one screen, and simply having the online submissions overlaying each other and identifying the changes. And as the planner makes notes, those notes automatically go to the client. That is the new online planning system. The old system, which I saw in action as well, is a person sitting with two computer screens, with one set of plans on a computer screen, one email file open on the other screen, and 3 physical plans laid out on the floor around him. And that is a difference, Mr. Speaker, in how this online planning system will reduce the time and increase the efficiency of the department. Planning has also established a public education program and is working hard to make its process more accessible via radio, TV, trade shows, and providing timely responses to its dedicated question and answer email address, info@planning.gov.ky. Additional improvements in customer service can be expected into 2018, both online and as they launch an internal education plan to cross-train staff to ensure consistency within the department. Mr. Speaker, additional improvements and phases will occur in 2018 to further enhance the customer's experience. These improvements will be undertaken in tandem with the work underway by my e-government and computer services departments, the proposed work of which I will now highlight. Mr. Speaker, IT services are as an important and essential tool to any large business entity. It is therefore vital to have a properly functioning and well-resourced entity that is also staffed and properly skilled personnel. However, due to lack of past funding and significant gaps in skills and resources being identified within the Computer Services Department, and it is imperative that these deficiencies are addressed at its earliest opportunity. Members will note that in this regard, money is allocated in the new budget to replace essential hardware and effect much-needed infrastructure improvements, as well as to provide additional human resources. A review of the Computer Services Department's operations will also be completed to ensure that the department is only tasked with those requirements it is able to properly meet. A key component of this review will be to identify those opportunities for the department to actively pursue and deepen public-private partnerships. Mr. Speaker, the department will continue to facilitate continued economic growth by meeting its expanding business requirements within the government. This includes supporting and maintaining 41 in-house applications, 6 third-party applications, 71 websites, and core revenue earning systems that brings in a revenue of some $650 million a year. Equally importantly, the Computer Services Department will continue to partner with the National Workforce Development Agency on a clearinghouse system to connect Caymanians with local businesses, thereby increasing job placements and identifying opportunities to meet government's objective of achieving full Caymanian employment. The department will continue to improve the reliability and security of government's information network, which, Mr. Speaker, you will appreciate is vital to ensuring a stable and effective government. Mr. Speaker, cybersecurity is a matter of particular concern, as was highlighted very recently by a local cyber attack. Government needs to be better protected. Government needs to better protect itself from these attacks, since confidentiality of data gathered is vital to government's business. This area is therefore being given top priority and the proper funding put in place to address our needs. Mr. Speaker, another initiative very close to my heart is e-government, due in no small part as it ties in directly to reducing red tape, making it easier to do business and increasing revenue to government. I'm therefore particularly pleased that I have been given responsibility for the e-government department. Mr. Speaker, there are many projects already in motion and more are planned for the future across all of government. A very good example is a highly successful, recently introduced online application for the services of police clearance certificates. Mr. Speaker, for its part, the e-government department will introduce many more such new online services and revamp existing applications and portals so as to enhance overall customer service. Mr. Speaker, for example, the public can look forward to a new customer online registration service, which will be introduced. This service will involve the introduction of an electronic ID card for easier access to all government online business services and will be a one-stop shop for all government agencies. Mr. Speaker, participation will be totally on a voluntary basis, but I am sure that people will quickly see the great benefits offered and will wish to sign up. In short, Mr. Speaker, the departments will be linked with one another and reduce the onerous burden of the customer of repeatedly having to fill in forms to provide the same information given already to another government entity. Mr. Speaker, would you like me to move on to the next? Mr. Speaker, I will now move on to the Public Works Department, or PWD. PWD will continue to provide high-quality maintenance support for over 1 million square feet of public facilities and to over 100 public beaches, parks, cemeteries, and public open spaces, as well as to plan, design, and construct new public facilities and execute necessary expansions and refurbishments to existing public facilities. Public Works Department will also continue its focus on improving customer service. But more importantly, Mr. Speaker, you and the members will be aware of the Major Projects Office, established within the Public Works Department to manage the government's major capital projects. This office has been a great success and was even lauded by the Office of the Auditor General in a recent report. The Major Projects Office is presently overseeing the following projects: the Cruise Terminal Project, the Airports Development Project, the Integrated Solid Waste Management Project, the Long-Term Residential Mental Health Facility, the completion of the John Gray High School, the new RICIPS, or the New Royal Cayman Islands Police Services Headquarters, and the new courts facility. Mr. Speaker, I am particularly excited and plan to champion another project spearheaded by the Public Works Department. That being, Mr. Speaker, the apprenticeship program. This program perfectly emphasizes the government's commitment to and support of technical and vocational training, as was outlined by the Honorable Premier in his budget policy statement. Mr. Speaker, you as the Father of the House and all members here can recall that we have talked for many years about setting up a proper technical and vocational facility to enable successive generations of our youngsters to get into the lucrative trades. However, despite good intentions, Mr. Speaker, this work has languished over the years. Mr. Speaker, it is in this light the training provided by the Public Works Department under the apprenticeship program takes on a new meaning. My ministry and the Public Works Department are committed to meeting the needs of young Caymanians looking into careers in the trades, notably the highly lucrative construction trade. With this in mind, Mr. Speaker, the Public Works Department has stepped up to the plate and has begun offering apprenticeship training itself. Public Works Department will now expand its very successful construction vocational training pilot program. Mr. Speaker, in July this year, after a one-year apprenticeship, 5 young Caymanians, all from the Cayman Islands Further Education Center, completed the pilot program when they were assessed at the Public Works Department for internationally recognized City and Guilds certification out of London and achieved either foundation or proficiency level certification. This, Mr. Speaker, is a significant milestone as it is the first time that this level of construction vocational certification has been delivered in the Cayman Islands. The Public Works Department has taken on this responsibility to promote the careers of young Caymanians, not only through providing mentorship during internship of students from the high schools, but also additionally through proper technical training, which can lead to an internationally recognized certification. It has now been agreed that the program should be expanded through the provision of additional and new facilities and the provisions of specialized training personnel. The 2017-18 apprenticeship program that began last month offers both Levels 1 and Level 2 City and Guilds training. Mr. Speaker, 15 apprentices are enrolled in the program. 3 of the Level 2 apprentices are graduates of the pilot program. I'm happy to say the program will expand again in September 2018, when it is anticipated some 30 apprentices will be enrolled in Levels 1, 2, and 3 programs, Mr. Speaker. The intention is to make Public Works Department an accredited training center for such internationally recognized construction vocational training within the next 1 to 2 years, Mr. Speaker. The added benefits are we will be training young Caymanians not only for government employ, but for employment within the private sector as well. I heartily endorse the government's plan to develop a coherent strategy to better use such programs, including working with the private sector to identify their needs for trained employees and improve employment opportunities for our people, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as the Premier mentioned previously, this newly expanded program is positive proof of this government's commitment to training and education and ties in to the further general commitment of ensuring that at least 75% of our high school graduates seek further education, either academic or technical and vocational, by the end of our administration. A noble goal, Mr. Speaker, indeed, and one that I am sure all members will agree with and support. Mr. Speaker, with your permission, I will now move to another very important agency that I have responsibility for, namely the provision of road infrastructure and the National Roads Authority, the NRA. Mr. Speaker, as you are aware, infrastructure needs to keep pace with the development not only to retain the current level, but also to attract new and revenue-generating development activity. Mr. Speaker, our government is fully committed to investing in the road infrastructure. But equally important, we have got to continue to maintain the some $802 million in assets currently under the management of the National Roads Authority. Members will be pleased to learn that the final phase of the ongoing Linford-Pearson Highway will be completed in 2018. Government also has given its support to a significant number of other major ongoing projects. Members, for example, have seen significant improvements to the Esther-Tibbetts Highway. Mr. Speaker, before I outline some of the other road projects that the NRA will be working on during the two-year budget term, I have to emphasize that revisions to the roads law and the NRA law and regulations, as well as revisions to the explosives law and its regulations, will be brought to the House during this two-year term. Now, Mr. Speaker, as indicated, I will list out some of the planned road works as funded from the operational road fund budgets in the upcoming years. The Grand Harbor Roundabout, the Silver Oaks Roundabout Circulating Path, the Silver Oaks Roundabout Additional Circulating Lane, the Walkers Road 3-lane improvement scheme, Shamrock Road westbound, the Butterfield Roundabout, the CNB Roundabout, the Eclipse Drive, which is doing with public-private financing initiatives, the Esther-Tibbetts Highway from Lime Tree Bay remediation at the water plant, the Seaview Road continuing, and the West Bay Road Fire Station to Marsh Road, the Bordentown Road continuing, the North Sound Road from Shedden Road Signal to the Butterfield Roundabout, the major intersection upgrades, Eastern and West Bay Road, Smith Road, and Bordentown and BT Way. Mr. Speaker, additionally, the following new roads will be funded from the government's capital development budget: Selkirk Drive reconstruction, curb and gutter cross sections, phases 1 and 2, the Crew Road widening from Nevis Close to Agnes Way, the Shedden Road widening from Napa to the Elizabethan Square, the North Church Street improvement, Mary Street to Eastern Avenue, the Linford-Pearson Highway widening, phase 2, the Eastern Avenue to Elgin Avenue, new connector road, Stadium Drive to Walkers Road, the road widening to 3 lanes from Silver Oaks to Shamrock Road, and, as I mentioned earlier, the West Bay Road South rejuvenation. Mr. Speaker, last but by no means least, I turn to some ministerial level projects. As I mentioned when I first began my debate contribution, my ministry has placed special emphasis on urban redevelopment, a subject very dear to my heart, and I have prioritized the Georgetown revitalization plans. Mr. Speaker, you are aware that the previous governments, NGOs, business groups, and general public have all talked about the need to revitalize Georgetown and re-energize a flagging urban landscape. Once the offices and business centers stop humming after 5 p.m. Mr. Speaker, urban redevelopment is also a vital tool in the fight against crime and urban decay. The progressive government was well aware of the need for such revitalization and had been committed to this cause over the last 3 to 4 years. Mr. Speaker, the Government of National Unity and my ministry will continue to take this commitment forward. We have prioritized improving and expanding the road network within Georgetown to better serve the public and to help Georgetown's revitalization. Mr. Speaker, greater emphasis will be placed during the next 2 years on the development of Central Georgetown's business district. We will review and intend to implement fully the Georgetown Revitalization Plan. And one way of accomplishing this will be the establishment of the Urban Redevelopment Commission. Mr. Speaker, it is envisioned that success of this initiative is dependent on a private-public sector partnership. The plan is for the ministry to recruit an individual that will be responsible for the implementation of the Georgetown Business Revitalization Plan. As the plan is to engage our private partners, it is proposed that the project manager will engage the private sector partners and act as a liaison to government agencies to facilitate the implementation of the project. Mr. Speaker, the plan itself envisages more effective public-private sector partnership, which will assist us in accomplishing this much-needed revitalization project. Mr. Speaker, as mentioned earlier, my ministry will also be striding forward with the implementation of the recently announced National Energy Policy, to which government remains fully committed. Government and my ministry support renewable energy initiatives for the Cayman Islands. Assistance will also be provided via the newly appointed National Energy Council. Mr. Speaker, we also need to ensure fuel supply security for the Cayman Islands. Government will continue to explore areas where we can best support specific targets by provisions of specific subsidies and via other means. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, my ministry will be examining the possibilities of the recreation of a National Investment Bureau with a view to encourage overseas and local investments in the Cayman Islands. I envisage this investment bureau as being a one-stop shop for investors wishing to do business with or in the Cayman Islands. Mr. Speaker, most countries around the world have such an entity. And if the Cayman Islands are to compete in the world market for these very valuable investor dollars, then we must not only be proactive and market ourselves, but we must also look to put in place the appropriate centralized office to meet the needs of these potential investors. Mr. Speaker, I wish to touch upon one other plan that the Honorable Premier mentioned in his budget policy statement, that of beach access. I wholeheartedly endorse the further strengthening of the public's rights to the beach access through policies, procedures, and regulations that guides the operations of the Public Lands Commission, and which was established in June of this year. Mr. Speaker, I also welcome that the Commission will ensure that beach access by the public is safeguarded and maintained on all 3 of our islands. Our beaches and coastlines are a national asset, and as such, should remain a viable endowment and cherished legacy for our future generations to enjoy. Mr. Speaker, there can be no compromising on this. Our land and sea and sand should remain our collective national legacies for our present and our future generations to enjoy in perpetuity. Mr. Speaker, I also join the Honorable Premier when he commends the Department of Tourism and Cayman Islands private sector tourism partners for remaining unified, innovative, and consistent in their efforts to promote the Cayman Islands as a destination of choice. And I commend the government for placing adequate funds in this budget to ensure our tourism industry thrives. This is certainly money well spent, as a return to our people in jobs and livelihoods far outweigh what we put in. Mr. Speaker, I also welcome the more aggressive approach that will be taken to eradicate the invasive green iguanas and the Aedes aegypti mosquitoes. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, I would certainly be remiss if I did not endorse the proposed Cayman Honors Scheme. Mr. Speaker, our people are our greatest asset, and we ought to honor those who made significant contributions to the development of this nation. It is also with a glad heart that I endorse the increase to poor relief and pensioners who receive less than $750 a month in payments. We need to look after our own and ensure that all Caymanians live outside of poverty and, Mr. Speaker, with dignity. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, it is a truism to say that this is truly a people's budget, one that is taking care of so many aspects of our people's needs. Mr. Speaker, a lot of serious thinking has gone into this budget. It includes a number of historic firsts. Mr. Speaker, let us give thanks to the God Lord for sparing us and ask Him to give us fortitude, compassion, and gratitude for the things we have almost taken for granted in these islands we call home. Let us also work together as the mature representatives that our people wanted us to be when they sent us here to serve them in this honorable house. Mr. Speaker, I look forward to the support for my submissions to this budget from all honorable members of this House. And Mr. Speaker, I thank you, and may God bless you and these Cayman Islands. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? The member from East End. Honorable member, we can take the lunch break now, or we can do it another 20 minutes or 10 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I am okay with where we want to go, but I need if we're going to start,
We'll continue for another 10 minutes.
I guess it's my job now. Mr. Speaker, it appears like I have been promoted or demoted, whichever way one looks at it. Mr. Speaker, thank you. Mr. Speaker, in a few days, that being November the 15th, I will have served 17 years representing the people of East End. There aren't, Mr. Speaker, the Premier said the 8th. We were elected on the 8th. We were sworn in on the 15th. We good. Yeah, the coup was the 8th of 2001, too. Mr. Speaker, when I came here as a freshman, I recognize, like all freshmen, that I had much to learn. I soon learned that there were two things that were pivotal in my success as a legislator. One was that there were rules, written rules. The second one was that there were conventions, unwritten conventions, that needed to be taught. I needed to learn from other members. The rules were laid out, albeit rather old, in the standing orders. So it felt my responsibility to read and understand those standing orders. Conventions were to be given to me through members who had served here for a longer period of time. Mr. Speaker, I had the best teachers anyone could ask for. And permit me to tell this country who they were. The late Captain Mabra Cornell, the late Edna Moyle, Roy Budden, Gilbert McLean, Honorable Kurt Tibbetts, Honorable Anthony Eden, Honorable Linford Pearson, Frank Macfield, Honorable Juliana O'Connor, and your good self. I could not have asked for a better set of teachers. I now recognize that that role of passing on conventions has been passed on to me. I am grateful to the people of East End who gave me this opportunity, but I'm also grateful to those current and past members who gave me a glimpse and taught me about this thing called governance and legislature. I also understood that I had a part to play in learning the rules. So I put my back to it, and every opportunity I got, I traveled to other countries within the Commonwealth to understand how this new career that had been entrusted to me had to go. I started reading everything I could find. I spent thousands of dollars to purchase books. So much so that I recently brought some for my good friend, the member from Badentown West. 7, 8 of them or something like that. Mr. Speaker, there are many stories of critique by those members who taught me that the Premier and I can recall. One in particular was when Honorable Linford Pearson stood on the floor of these hallowed halls and stopped the Premier and I from reading our speeches. He did it firmly, but respectfully. I recall the Premier and I, in that first year, staying up till 4 o'clock in the morning, preparing speeches for the next day, or for that day. The Premier, more so than I, would come in with 3-inch binders filled with it, and we would read, and we would read. And Honorable Linford Pearson got up one day and he quite gently but firmly brought our attention to 32.4. But they had given us sufficient latitude at that time to get an understanding of what our responsibilities were. I recall also that we were taught by those statesmen and women that we had to obey the rules. I recall that one of my most embarrassing days in this house was when the Honorable Juliana O'Connor, Speaker, summons me to her chambers. And she didn't say very much. She just said, "Stop it." Of course, cutie Arden McLean, "Madam Speaker, what did I do now?" "You know what you did." And that was the end of the conversation. Mr. Speaker, many days in the thrust of this debate, when the Premier and I were fighting back to back against all others, the Speaker, Juliana O'Connor, would look over her glasses. And I knew I had trimmed my sail too close to the wind. And what was next? So I had to take a tack and find another wind source. I recall Captain Mabry, bless his soul. I was debating a motion or a bill on the liveaboard boats in the canals. And I believe he mistook sewage for something else. And he suspended the proceedings. And made the late Klein Glidden, bless his soul, who was friend of all of us, summon me to his chamber. And he said to me that he and I had spent 5 years on the planning board, and he had never heard me use such language, and he was not going to allow me to do that. I understood then that he had mistaken what I had said, and I explained that to him. But the key was the lessons that were taught and learned in those chambers. It was recognized, agreed, understood that we were all grown men, women, responsible, who all had a responsibility to learn the rules. We, Ralston Anglin, Klein Gittin, the member from West Bay Central, we all knew Lyndon Martin, and we were termed by the then governor Young Turks. But we were enthusiastic. And we were fighting for a cause. Many a day, I felt in that first year Honorable Juliana O'Connor pulled my shirt sleeve, my coat sleeve, and said, sit down. Many a day that she did that to me. I thanked her for it. Mr. Speaker, one of the conventions that I learned here was that in throne speech and budget debate, which were always joined together, and we have had so many different times that those came, May, November, December, August. We understood that that was the only time within the year that you could say your ABCs forward, backward, and sideways. Absolute, total latitude was given because that's when members can say everything and anything respectfully about the governance of their country and the advocacy of their people. Those were the days when the Premier and I and Ralston and Klein and Lyndon stood on the floor of this honorable house and never gave in. Because we believed in a cause and we fought therefore. Mr. Speaker, that is the story I've learned also from my travels. Throne speech is a pivotal part of the governance of one's country. And that is the reason why we came here. To participate for or against the manner in which our country is governed as representatives on behalf of our people. I trust that long may that survive in the thrust of this politics. I have said many times that on the 15th day of November 2000, I walked through that door with my family. to be sworn in here. And I cannot recall a steeple being above the door. What I do recall was when I was lined up behind here, waiting to be the next and slipping from chair to chair. I leaned my head back against that slate that came from Wales, Scotland. And it was cold because I had done my hair very low. And I looked towards the heavens and I said, God, I hope it is not this cold in here. I am here to tell my fellow colleagues and this country that there were times when the water was boiling, but there were times when there was ice on this floor. But it has been the most enjoyable journey I've ever had. And I hope for these new ones that the same happens to you. This is the place where many lessons are learned. This is the place where your life will change forever. The Premier and I came in here together. We have been on different sides. We have governed this country together, but we have never lost respect for each other. We have fought back to back. We have fought with saber rattling, but we have never, ever lost respect for each other. And today I know that if he has to defend me with his life because of right, he's going to do it. And he knows the same about me, despite what others may think about that rivalry. His children are off bounds, and I expect mine to be the same. That is what this means. We are first in the Constitution, Caymanians. The Premier hopes that he will read my obituary. Long may he live, but that he will not do.
Honorable
Unless-
member, I think we are ready for the lunch break.
That's fine.
The House will suspend until 2:15.